Thanks, guys. It's actually my second time speaking at Techtorium. So some of you students back there might recognise me, and in case you're wondering, yes, I do still have the Kermit the Frog slide in this presentation. So look, I have been building software for 15, 20 years now, and I realised after a short while that there's a common theme to the people that come to me for software development. And that common theme is that a lot of my clients have already had a previous software developer, but they've fallen out with them for some reason. But no one's ever come to me and said, oh, they don't know this trendy language, or they didn't abstract their business logic from their database, or they didn't add a caching layer. They come to me with things like, they charge me too much, or they stopped picking up the phone, or they just didn't do what I want them to do. So I wrote a book about it, and I called it How to Know If Your Software Developer is Trying to Kill You. And so tonight I'm going to take you through the non-technical aspects of being a software developer. And these aspects, I think, are more important than the technical side. Technical is a baseline, but everybody's doing technical. If you want to stand out in this industry, you need to develop your interpersonal skills. And tonight I'm going to show you how to do it. So here's a really awesome quote that I found online. It's actually a quote by me from a couple of years ago. Here's another quote I found. It was the second paragraph. So to get started, I'll just quickly introduce Blackball Software, and I'm going to practice what I preach. I've got two sides to this slide here. This is what we do, and this is how I describe what we do to developers. And the orange slide is how I should describe it to clients. And I was talking to Mike before, and he said, what do you do, Ben? And I was thinking, remember slide 4, remember slide 4, remember slide 4. So when we talk to clients, we don't talk about the technical stuff that we do. We don't talk about APIs and data transformation and caching layers. We try to put our services into the context of their problem. So we say, well, we can sync X to Y, or we build websites and databases and things like that. I'm still working on this, but that bottom quote is pretty much my one-liner now. So I'm going to break this talk into two parts. I'm going to take you through some common tech scenarios, and I'm going to try to put them into human-centric terms, and then I'm going to give you a few quick tips on what I think makes you a better software developer and what we look for when we're employing at Blackball Software. So, minimum viable product. This is my baby. I love minimal viable products. But the hardest thing about a minimal viable product is expressing to the customer that you want to take their idea, which they've been working on for a year, dreaming about it. They've been saving up their money. They might have borrowed from family and friends. They've got this perfect vision in their mind. And then it's your job to basically just cut it up, slice parts off it, push bits out, tell them that that's been done before. And it's a really hard thing to do. To do politely, I should say. So the thing I want to emphasize is that as a software developer, you see things all the time. You see the same patterns again and again, and it's very easy to jump in and quickly fix someone's problem or quickly tell them that it's been done before. But you have to remember that from their perspective, this is their baby, this is their dream. So you just have to, I'm not saying don't cut those things out, but just be a little bit more tactile, a little bit more thoughtful about how you do it. And be humble. Just because you've seen it before, you see it from your perspective all the time. You see it from a technical perspective. You haven't seen it from their perspective, and you haven't seen the market opportunity that they're trying to fill. Technical debt, another baby that I love. So technical debt is basically it's like a mortgage on a house. You borrow now on the proviso that your future self is going to pay it off for you later. So with software, you might work really hard and really fast and pull some late nights to get something out to the client, but that means compromising on things like the aforementioned caching layer. You need to, the programmer in you will hate this, and as that mountain of technical debt piles up, you'll begin to resent the software, and then you go back to the software and you're less inclined to do a good job because it's already a little bit messy. So the purist in you will go to the client and you'll say, well, this is pretty much verbatim what I had a conversation I had with a client about 3 years ago, which is what made me realise that technical debt it's a problem for you, it's a personal problem for you, but from their point of view, it's just a cost of doing business. And you mustn't obsess over prioritising these tiny little corner cases if it's at the expense of the product and the client actually getting to market. So this car wash analogy is another one which again I only really realised about 3 or 4 years ago. No client comes to you with an exact breakdown of exactly what they want. They just say, I want some software developed. But there are many, many parts to building software. This is the part that the client thinks about. But there's documentation, there's follow-up, there's continuous integration, continuous deployment, there's support, maybe the browser's upgrade, maybe it needs documenting, maybe they've got a team of other developers that you need to educate. These are all part of software development, but your client's expectations will vary. And this is, I think, where communication is so important, because if you don't express to them straight away what you consider software development to be, then you've already got this misalignment of expectations, and this is responsible for a lot of budget blowouts and a lot of kind of disappointed clients when they wonder where their documentation is in 6 months. I should also point out that there's no right or wrong collection of these. Some clients only want the orange bit, some want the whole thing, but the important thing is to make sure that you just communicate with them early on. So developer turnover, and by that I mean there's a human. When a client talks to you, they're talking to a person, and you establish a rapport with them over time, and they get used to the way that you work. And this, as a business owner, is one of the hardest things for me, is managing that change between developers, managing the client and managing their new expectations. So the way to do this is to automate things, put a lot of the interaction into the business, right? So automatic billing and maybe some budget alerts, things like that. It's really nice to send the client an email summarising what they're getting, and then when the new developer comes on, there's less of that kind of day-to-day stuff that the client's expecting, and then they can just focus on the personal relationship. So my top skills. In this section I'm going to talk about what we look for when we hire at Blackball Software, and what I think it means to be a good software developer, and what I think it means to stand out in software development. So I've broken this down into 3 sections. Communication. So ironically, I think a lot of software developers get into software developer precisely so they don't have to communicate with other people. But those days are gone. At Blackball, we do our best to cut out project managers, and we let the client phone our software developers directly. They email them directly. Some naughty clients even phone them after hours. And that's a bit of an imposition for the developers, but it's also part of providing an excellent service. As the gatekeeper between their software and their product, then it's the software developer's responsibility to be on call when things go wrong, and to talk to the client and express why something is the way it is, or why something is not the way it is. I've listed some examples there of common kind of interaction scenarios, and these happen every day, especially this last one. You don't quite phrase it like it's a stupid idea, but a lot of the work we do is talking ourselves out of work, or postponing it for another few months. Or maybe you recognise that it's something else that they mentioned 6 months ago, so you can pull them forward and do them together because they're similar architecture or something like that. But you have to be able to express this to the client, and communication is a two-way street. The first direction is geek to human. So you're a software developer, you take pride in your craft, and often you'll spend a late night building this beautiful piece of code, and all it does, it manifests itself in like a little button, or maybe a page loads 100 milliseconds faster, but you are proud of that. And then you try to explain it to the client, and they don't really care. They just don't. But you have to learn how to express its importance, even though they don't really understand or appreciate the technical skills behind it, because they're going to get a bill at the end of the month as well, so they need to be pretty pleased with what they're going to get. I've got a picture of the iPhone there. I think the iPhone does this really well. They've taken incredible technology and they left their egos behind, and they've just presented this incredibly simple UI that your grandmother can pick up, or my 2-year-old can pick up and use. I think it's really impressive. So the other direction is human to geek translation, and this one will trip you up. This is where a client will ring up and say, I need to be able to edit person. I need to register a person in our system. And you say, yep, cool, 1 hour. So you build a form, enter their first name, last name, email. But what the client really means is they need to register a person and they need to maybe assign one of the courses to them. Or what happens if the person leaves? What happens if they go away on holiday? What happens if their birth date is less than 18 years old? What if they have a bad email address? What if they've got 2 email addresses? Or what if they share that email address with somebody else that's already registered in the system? You have to ask these questions because they will come up eventually, and the better a communicator you are, the sooner you can prevent problems. So the final thing is passion. I think that a great software developer leaves work with their head a little bit fuzzy, but proud of what they've done and thinking about the problem that bugged them all day. They fall asleep dreaming in databases, and they get frustrated when their page takes that extra 100 milliseconds to load. This kind of attitude comes across in the quality of your work and the way you communicate with your colleagues. So when we are hiring, it's hard to, anybody can say that they're passionate about software development. So we look for some very simple manifestations of that. Contributing to open source software, for example. I always ask them what tech newsletters they read. And just ask, what tech in the future are you excited about? What do you want to do with your career? And it's very easy to tell after just a few conversations that this person loves what they do, they love their craft, and these are the people that we want to hire. Now, this is the Kermit the Frog slide. You can be too passionate. You get people that are a little bit obsessed. Maybe they're calling you from their basement or something like that. This comes across pretty quick too. There's a place for people like this, but it's not at Blackball Software. So look, this is the end of the talk. I really do want to emphasise that this is not just airy-fairy stuff. It's very, it's just a modern way of working these days, and it's very easy to find someone that can code you a database. You can do this offshore, right? You can just dial it up on one of these 99 design sites and get something built to spec. But to go that extra step further, to think about the context in which you're building your software, the context in which you're talking about your client and how you relate that software to your client, that's what makes your software beautiful, and that's what makes your clients happy. Cool, you've got 1 minute and 18 seconds for a long round of applause.